In this episode, we move from preventing problems to responding when problems happen, because no serious AI program survives on prevention alone. Even well-designed systems can produce harmful outputs, leak sensitive content, or behave unpredictably after an update. And the difference between a minor stumble and a major crisis is often how the organization responds in the first hours. Incident response is not a dramatic Hollywood moment. It is a disciplined routine that protects people, protects data, and protects trust under time pressure. You will hear 4 words throughout this lesson because they form a practical mental model you can reuse: triage, containment, communication, and recovery. These are not just steps on a checklist, but distinct responsibilities that must happen together when an AI system misbehaves. By the end, you should be able to explain what each phase means, why it matters, and how teams stay calm and coordinated when the situation is messy and incomplete. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is by clarifying what an AI incident actually is, because beginners sometimes assume incidents only mean hacking or downtime. An AI incident is any event where the system's behavior, data handling, or outputs create unacceptable risk or real harm, whether that harm is to a person, an organization, or both. That could include the model producing unsafe recommendations, generating toxic content, revealing confidential information, or giving confident incorrect guidance that leads someone to take a harmful action. It could also include the system being manipulated through adversarial inputs, or the system drifting in production so performance degrades silently until users are affected. Another important category is governance failure, where the system is used outside its approved scope, such as when teams begin using it for sensitive decisions it was never validated for. When you define incidents this way, you realize incident response is not only for security teams. It involves product, privacy, legal, data, and leadership. Handling AI incidents well requires shared definitions so that when someone reports a problem, the organization treats it with the right seriousness rather than dismissing it as a simple bug. Triage is the first phase, and it is about making sense of uncertainty quickly without pretending you already know the full story. Triage begins by gathering enough information to answer 3 questions. What happened? How harmful could it be? And how fast could the harm spread? With AI incidents, the harm can spread through user behavior as much as through technology, because an unsafe output can be copied, forwarded, or acted on immediately. A beginner mistake is to treat triage as a debate about blame, but triage is a decision about urgency and scope. You want to identify the affected feature, the affected user population, and the affected data types, such as whether personally identifiable information, PII, might be involved. You also want to classify the incident type, because the response differs if the event is a safety failure, a privacy leak, a security abuse pattern, or a performance drift. Triage should produce a clear initial severity assessment that drives action, even if that assessment is updated later as more evidence arrives. A key triage skill for AI incidents is distinguishing between a one-off odd output and a systemic failure pattern, because AI systems sometimes produce strange responses that are not repeatable. Repeatability matters because it changes how you investigate and how you contain. If a harmful output can be reproduced consistently with a certain input pattern, the system is more likely to be exploited, and containment becomes urgent. If the output appears tied to a specific data source, a specific retrieval result, or a specific recent update, that points toward a change-related cause and suggests a rollback path. If the incident is being reported by many users across different contexts, that suggests broad drift or a broken guardrail, which may require rapid feature restriction. Beginners sometimes assume you must know root cause before acting, but triage is about acting with partial information. You can often take protective actions while the deeper investigation continues, and doing so is not overreaction when the harm potential is high. A well-run triage process also documents early observations carefully, because early facts become important later when reconstructing timelines and decisions. Containment is the second phase, and it is the phase that most directly reduces harm while the team is still learning what is happening. Containment means limiting the system's ability to cause further damage, which might involve disabling a risky feature, restricting access to a smaller group, reducing retrieval scope, or switching to safer fallback behavior. In some cases, containment means adding friction, such as requiring human review for high-impact outputs until confidence is restored. The beginner misconception here is that containment always means shutting everything down, but containment can be targeted and proportional when designed well. You want to reduce blast radius, meaning the number of users and systems exposed, and you want to reduce the chance of repeated harm, such as repeated leakage or repeated unsafe recommendations. Containment decisions should be reversible and should be tied to evidence, because you may need to adjust quickly as new information emerges. Good containment is also coordinated, because product, security, and privacy must agree on what is being restricted and what the user experience will look like during the incident window. Containment for AI incidents often has a special twist. The system can be harmful through language alone, even when it cannot directly execute actions. That means containment must consider not only what data the system can access, but also what outputs it can produce and how those outputs might influence human decisions. If the incident involves toxicity, containment might require stricter output filtering or disabling certain conversational modes that encourage boundary pushing. If the incident involves hallucinations in a high-stakes workflow, containment might require disabling that workflow or adding forced verification queues so users do not treat outputs as authoritative. If the incident involves prompt injection through retrieved content, containment might require removing the contaminated content source or narrowing retrieval to trusted documents. If the incident involves privacy leakage, containment might include reducing stored logs, restricting access to transcripts, and preventing sensitive content from being processed further. Beginners should recognize that containment is a form of safety engineering under pressure, and it relies on having pre-planned levers that can be pulled quickly. When those levers exist, teams can contain harm without improvising risky changes. Communication is the third phase, and it often determines whether a technical incident turns into a reputational crisis. Communication is not only what you say externally, it is also how you keep internal teams aligned so they do not contradict each other or act on rumors. Internally, communication should deliver a clear picture of what is known, what is unknown, what actions have been taken, and what people should do next, especially people who may receive questions from customers or executives. Externally, communication must be accurate, cautious, and timely, which is challenging because early in an incident you rarely know everything. Beginners sometimes think communication should wait until you have perfect answers, but silence can allow misinformation to spread and can damage trust. The better approach is to communicate what you know, what you are doing, and what you will update, without guessing. Communication must also respect privacy, because you should not disclose sensitive details while attempting to explain the incident. Handling communication will mean balancing transparency with responsible restraint, and that balance is easier when roles are clear and messages are reviewed quickly by the right stakeholders. Communication becomes even more complex when the incident affects personal data, contractual commitments, or regulated environments, because the organization may have obligations that include notifying certain parties within specific timeframes. A privacy leak involving PII can trigger legal and regulatory expectations, and those expectations may require you to coordinate closely with legal and privacy teams before sharing details. Vendor involvement adds another layer, because if a third-party model or service contributed to the incident, you need aligned messaging and a clear plan for how vendor updates and mitigations will be communicated. Another common situation is customer impact, where customers want to know whether their data was affected, whether the system can still be trusted, and what steps they should take. Communication should avoid technical jargon and focus on what actions are being taken to reduce harm, such as feature restrictions, monitoring increases, or data access changes. Beginners should learn that good incident communication does not promise perfection. It promises disciplined response and continued updates. When communication is handled carefully, it can preserve trust even when the incident itself is serious. Recovery is the fourth phase, and it is about returning the system and the organization to a stable, safe operating state without rushing into new mistakes. Recovery is not just turning features back on. It includes validating that the system is safe again, confirming that containment changes did not create new problems, and ensuring users understand what has changed. In AI incidents, recovery often includes revalidation of model behavior, rechecking guardrails, and confirming that any data issues, such as contaminated training inputs or unsafe retrieved content, have been addressed. Recovery also includes operational readiness, meaning monitoring, alerting, and escalation paths are tuned based on what was learned so the next incident is detected faster. Beginners sometimes assume recovery ends when the outage is over, but AI incidents can have aftereffects, such as ongoing user distrust or ongoing misuse patterns. Recovery should therefore include rebuilding confidence through evidence and communication, not through optimism. A disciplined recovery also respects the possibility of recurrence, so teams reintroduce capabilities gradually when appropriate rather than flipping everything back on instantly. When recovery is handled well, the organization returns to normal with stronger controls than before. A critical part of handling incidents well is evidence discipline, because without good records, you cannot learn reliably and you cannot defend your decisions later. Evidence includes timestamps, versions, configurations, input patterns, output samples, monitoring signals, and the sequence of actions taken during triage, containment, communication, and recovery. It also includes who approved key decisions and why, because accountability matters when stakes are high. Beginners often underestimate how quickly facts become fuzzy during an incident, especially when multiple teams are working in parallel, so disciplined note-taking and artifact collection are essential. Evidence discipline must also be privacy-aware, because storing raw prompts and outputs can itself create sensitive records, so teams should capture what is needed while minimizing unnecessary exposure. Evidence supports root cause analysis, RCA, which is the structured investigation that follows, but it also supports immediate decisions because it helps prevent teams from chasing rumors. When evidence is strong, the organization can distinguish between a model behavior change, a data source change, a user behavior change, and an attacker-driven abuse pattern. That clarity makes mitigation more effective and prevents repeated incidents caused by the same underlying weakness. Root cause work is often where organizations either mature or stagnate, because it is tempting to stop once the fire is out. RCA is not about punishing someone. It is about identifying the contributing factors that made the incident possible and then changing the system so those factors are less likely to align again. With AI incidents, root causes are often multi-layered, involving model limitations, data quality issues, configuration choices, interface permissions, user training gaps, and monitoring blind spots. Beginners sometimes look for one cause, like the model hallucinated, but a mature analysis asks why the hallucination mattered, such as whether users were positioned to trust it and whether the system encouraged verification. Root cause work also asks whether change management failed, such as whether an update weakened a guardrail or expanded retrieval scope without adequate review. Another key question is whether the incident was detectable earlier, meaning whether monitoring signals existed but were ignored or whether the monitoring design lacked the right indicators. The outcome of RCA should be concrete corrective actions, not vague reminders to be careful. When organizations treat RCA as a learning engine, incidents lead to real improvement rather than recurring surprises. AI incidents are also a coordination test because they require multiple teams to act as one unit while responsibilities remain clear. Product must make user-facing decisions about feature availability and messaging. Security must assess abuse and access risks. Privacy must assess data exposure implications. Legal must assess obligations and external risk. And data teams must assess source integrity and pipeline issues. Beginners often imagine that one team leads everything, but in practice, leadership must be clear while expertise is distributed. An incident response (IR) structure works best when roles are predefined, such as who is the incident commander, who owns technical investigation, who owns communications, and who owns decision approval for major changes. Good coordination also includes avoiding contradictory actions, like one team re-enabling a feature while another team is still investigating whether it caused harm. This is why shared timelines, shared incident channels, and clear decision gates matter, even in audio-only understanding, because the concept is about making the organization function under stress. When teams coordinate well, containment is faster, communication is clearer, and recovery is safer. Coordination turns a complex incident into a manageable event rather than a chaotic scramble. Another lesson beginners should take seriously is that incidents can be technical, but they can also be social and behavioral, especially with AI systems. Sometimes the incident is not that the model is compromised, but that users are using it in ways that create harm, such as relying on it for medical or legal guidance when it was intended for drafting assistance. Sometimes the incident is that the system's outputs are being shared externally without context, creating reputational harm even when the system is functioning as designed. Sometimes the incident is that employees are pasting sensitive information into a tool because they think it is safe, creating privacy exposure through logs and vendor retention. Handling these incidents well means response plans include user guidance, access restrictions, and training refreshers, not only technical patches. It also means the organization treats near misses as valuable signals, because near misses reveal where safeguards are weak before a major harm occurs. Beginners often think reporting an issue gets people in trouble, but mature programs build a culture where reporting is rewarded because it improves safety. When behavioral incidents are handled with calm and clarity, teams reduce repeated misuse and strengthen trust. It is also important to connect incident handling to vendor relationships, because many AI systems depend on external services, and vendor incidents quickly become customer incidents. If a vendor changes model behavior, experiences an outage, or suffers a security event, your organization must still triage, contain, communicate, and recover, often with incomplete information from the vendor. This is where contracts, escalation paths, and service-level agreement (SLA) expectations become operational tools rather than legal paperwork. A good program knows how to contact vendor incident teams, what information to request, and how to coordinate timelines so customer communication is accurate. Vendor coordination also affects recovery, because you may need vendor changes to fix the root cause, and you need to understand what those changes will do to your system's behavior. Beginners sometimes assume vendors are either fully responsible or irrelevant, but the reality is shared dependency, which means shared risk. Handling incidents well includes having contingency plans, such as fallback features or temporary restrictions, so the business can function while vendor issues are addressed. When vendor handling is integrated into AAIR planning, external surprises become less destabilizing. As we close, handling AI incidents well is about being ready for messy reality and responding with disciplined structure rather than panic or denial. Triage helps you assess what happened, how severe it could be, and how fast harm could spread, even when facts are incomplete. Containment reduces harm quickly by limiting exposure, restricting risky capabilities, and applying targeted constraints that reduce blast radius while investigation continues. Communication keeps internal teams aligned and external stakeholders informed with accuracy and restraint, preserving trust while honoring privacy and legal obligations. Recovery restores safe operation through validation, gradual re-enablement when appropriate, monitoring improvements, and evidence-based confidence rather than wishful thinking. Across all phases, evidence discipline and RCA turn incidents into learning, and cross-team coordination turns complexity into manageable action. For brand new learners, the most important takeaway is that incidents are not proof a program failed. They are proof the world is complex, and the program's maturity is shown by how well it responds. When you can explain triage, containment, communication, and recovery as connected responsibilities, you are thinking like someone who can keep AI systems safer over time.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.